It's a Thurston County Amateur Barbecue Cook-Off. Now's your chance to bring your backyard barbecue skills into a local county-wide competition and see just how good it really is with the first annual Thurston County Amateur Barbecue Cook-Off competition. Just think, you could have a shot at prizes and recognition and have a great time as well. All the proceeds go to AFAB World. Go to afabworld.org or call 754-2868 for all the information. Preliminary rounds are forming now. It's the Thurston County Amateur Barbecue Cook-Off.
So, I ask you, this is the wrap up here. As a community, as a county, as an individual, what works given the good news and the bad news that Commissioner Romero shared with you? What works for you given the resources that you have, given the passion and the interest and the partners that you have and so forth? And I assume that's what you're going to talk about the rest of the day. I'm going to help, facilitate a couple of panels. I'm sorry it went a little bit long. We started a little bit late, but hopefully that was helpful. And I'll take a question or two if there's any time. Okay.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Woohoo! All right, let's get started again. So the next step is for Mike Kane, the planning manager for, I always like to say Whitman County because that's where I came from, but planning manager for Thurston County, going to talk about the Ag Overlay District and also have a fellow co-worker with him to talk about it. And what we're here to do is talk about what is the Overlay District, how it works, and then get some questions out. We're not really here to debate it. I just want to remind you, we're not debating the Overlay District. Today is about questions about how it's going to work, and if you have specific questions, type of business you have also. One of the things that we're trying to do in working with the county is to come up with what are the most frequently asked questions going to be. What is it that we can give to a business owner of, this is the consistency you should expect and the process you will need to go through to create an ag tourism enterprise. So please give a warm welcome to Mike Kane.
All right. As George said, I'm the planning manager for the Resource Stewardship Department. Our department is in charge of the review and approval for all of these agritourism enterprises that we've looked at today. You'll recall just a few minutes ago we saw all those pretty slides that Curtis had. All that stuff is now possible inside those red lines in southern Thurston County. Before this ordinance was adopted, some of that stuff you could do, but it required a good deal of permitting and fees and a lot of time to get it approved. Now, we've relaxed those permitting requirements. And in fact, many of the things that you can do now require no permit. Before I go into any of that stuff, a couple people I want to recognize. Number one, Commissioner Sandra Romero, this was about 2 years ago, it was her brainchild, and so she brought it forward to us and said, is this possible? And I think it is possible, and we started a long 2-year process, numerous meetings, public hearings, and heard from a lot of people, and it ultimately got approved on March 13, 2012 by the Board of County Commissioners. The other person I want to recognize is Scott McCormick, standing over there, one of my colleagues. He was the one who did most of the research and the initial drafting of the ordinance. So he knows it better than anyone in this room. So what I'm going to do is go over some of the stuff, some of the reasons why we have the ordinance, some of the things that it's going to do for farm owners in Thurston County, and then answer any questions that you might have. I wanted to read a couple of things first, right from the ordinance. Now, some of you, we passed out a lot of stuff. There's a copy of the actual Agritourism Overlay District ordinance. There's a copy of another ordinance, which is what we call the farm stand ordinance. That one was passed a little bit before the AOD. That one allows farm stands throughout the county. And prior to this, these things required various levels of permitting. Sometimes they weren't even allowed. now farm stands are allowed pretty much universally in the rural county. That farm stand ordinance also did one more thing. Our code previous to this had a requirement that all home-based industries must have access off of a paved road. Well, that deterred numerous applicants. It was pretty expensive, and some parts of the county, the access to farm areas were not paved. So this deleted that, so now you can have a gravel road. It has to be to certain standards. We want to make sure that it's safe so that fire and emergency vehicles can travel down the road. So between these three changes, first of which happened in November of 2011, and then the Agritourism Workshop just in March 2013, we feel like we've opened up a new era of agritourism, at least the possibility of that in Thurston County. So, a couple things I want to read, and I know Sandra mentioned this a little bit at the beginning, but in the actual ordinance, it talks about the reasons why this ordinance was passed, and some of the reasons were we're losing farmland at a very high rate, approximately 2,000 acres per year, according to the Thurston Regional Planning Council. This will help stem that. It also is for the continued viability of the local agricultural industry, and it's to conserve farms also. The AOD now is designed to allow new rural agricultural tourism where it was previously not allowed. So there are some small things that are going on in the county, and we want to encourage that to spread. And we have things like pumpkin patches and Shelter Farm, Rutledge Farm, and Latin Cider Mill. More of these things are encouraged now. So with that, at any time, jump in and ask questions. But our agritourism definition is very similar to the various definitions that Curtis showed. And it really includes anything you can do on a farm. And ours even goes one step further. There are certain things that are not required to be on a farm. For instance, country inns, wineries, breweries, distilleries, cider mills, those and farmers markets. Six items that you can do not on a farm. It's not a requirement. Now they have to be inside the red area of the AOD, and some of you on your chairs have a reduced copy of that same map that shows the AOD. In that packet of stuff, you have the two ordinances. You can take those home and read. And those, if you didn't get one, we can give you some. Just leave your name with Scott. And they're also online, the county website, both ordinances. The other sheet that you received is a listing, it's a summary listing of all the uses that are now permitted in the agritourism overlay district, or in some cases like farm stands around the entire county. And so what I want to do is go through those sort of quickly, one at a time, and tell you what you need to do now to do that sort of activity and how it's changed since before March. And just so you know too, the number one purpose here for passing these various ordinances was to improve and maintain the economic viability of farming in Thurston County. Now, there are lots of other benefits as well, as Curtis pointed out. I mean, fun is the primary one. It gives people places to go in Thurston County. It conserves farmland. It keeps money that might go out to another county. It keeps it in our county. And makes it more economically viable for farmers to retain their farms. So we hope it works out. And a key ingredient of this ordinance is that we must review it in 18 to 24 months to see if we need to tweak anything. I mean, we know it's probably not perfect. There may be things that we missed, for things that we decide we want to expand on. And in 18 to 24 months, we'll go look at all based on experiences occurred to that point and make changes if necessary. So, first of all, and those of you who have the sheet, just one paper that has two sides, it's called Cultivated Agritourism in Thurston County. The first category there are uses that are now allowed with no minimum lot size and are allowed by right, which means you can just do them. No land use permit is required. These things, there may, if you involve food or cars coming to the site, there are some things that other county departments may want to look at. But at least there's no land use permit. And getting land use permit is usually the most costly and time-consuming part of approval of a project. So we've eliminated that. Roadside farm stands, up to 700 square feet. You can have a structure of 700 square feet. Those are allowed anywhere you want to put them now. You want to put them in a safe place. But we want them out of the right of way so cars can get in there without causing safety hazard on the road. Prior to our roadside stand ordinance, our code was totally silent on farm stands. And we had, by policy, allowed very small ones, of very limited nature. And now it's codified in the size, and it's larger, and no requirements for permitting. So it's a great improvement. In addition to farm stands, now accessory, commercial, and retail. If you want to sell farm-related stuff, it could be food items, it could be items that are made on a farm, that can occur now. And in the past, it was absolutely required that that stuff, if you sold it on your farm, it must be produced or made on the farm. Now that's been relaxed such that it must be made or produced in the Pacific Northwest. So, and by definition, this ordinance describes that as Washington, Oregon, and Idaho. And only 75% of the display area has to include those kinds of products. So you could still have, even in your farm stand or your accessory retail stand, you could sell oranges, but clearly are not from your, I don't know, maybe in Yakima, they grow oranges? I don't think so. I don't think so. But grapes, apples, things that are not, well, they're from Pacific Northwest. Oranges, lemons, rakes and shovels, if you want to sell those sorts of things. Any sort of agricultural product you can sell there, so long as 75% of it comes from the Pacific Northwest. And that was something that was just totally not allowed prior to this ordinance. So, farmers markets. Farmers markets are allowed anywhere in that red area now. And we would encourage several farmers to get together, find a safe and a suitable location, and have a farmer's market. No land use permit is required. Prior to this ordinance, you could do a farmer's market, but you have to do it in a commercial zone. And if you've tried to do that sort of thing, you know that land is limited, number one. Number two, you're probably going to pay a pretty high rent for that space. Now, you can do it on any farm. It actually doesn't have to be a farm, but likely most of them would be. Seasonal uses. You pick fruits and vegetables, pumpkin patches, corn mazes, hay rides. Currently, well, not prior to this ordinance, our code was totally silent on those items. Now, we had some various determinations from our prosecutor's office that told us that if the code is silent and there's nothing else similar to that use, it's not allowed. Now, they're specifically called out for and they're allowed. What we've done in the past, we've got some in the county that we've considered grandfathered in, particularly Rutledge. It's been there a long enough time. even though they're not in the AOD, it would be something that we're going to say is grandfathered in. But in the future, anything in the red, you can do a corn maze without any kind of land use permitting, and no question about whether the code being silent on it, whether it's permitted or not permitted. A couple things that are really, I think, exciting, because we get calls all the time for people who want to do short-term events. And we've got short-term events allowed now, depending on how long you want to do them. There's a different review process, but if you're only going to do them for 10 days a year, weddings, smaller events, less than 100 people, we're talking here, those you can do up to 10 days a year without a permit of any kind. And in the short-term events, there are 3 different types of short-term events. If you exceed 100 people, say you want some kind of wine festival, then there is a site plan review, administrative, that we would look at. In the past, you'd have to get a special use permit for that, go to a hearing, take 4 to 6 months. And if you want to, and these, by the way, are one time. You get this permit one time, and it's good, perpetual, so long as you don't have a 3-year gap in use of the permit. And the bigger one is if you're going to do short-term events, more than 21 days a year, more than 200 people, you do need to get a special use permit. But we've even reduced the permitting process in that regard as well, because we're calling that a home-based industry. It seems a home-based industry. And it's a little bit easier and less costly to go through that special use permit than your standard special use permit that you would have had to get for any of these items in the past. Cottage food operations in a residence for jams, jellies, fruit butters, that kind of stuff is allowed now by right. Direct sale of your products on the farm that are grown, of course, that's allowed now without question. It's listed in the code. Farm tours, clinics, classes, seminars, again, do those all you want, and no permit required. Prior to this ordinance, a permit would have been required for that. The petting zoos, feed fishing, crop art, even an archery range, a zip line, these things are allowed now without a land use permit. Now, moving down to the next level, these are items, in each of these 3 categories, the uses get more intense, larger, and so there are some reviews in there. But prior to this ordinance, these uses either required us to go straight to a public hearing, or they just flat out weren't allowed. So a lot of ordinances were relaxed for agritourism purposes. Larger farm stands up to 2,000 square feet, and that's pretty good size. It requires a site plan review. The staff will review it. You go in, Scott will probably be the guy to look at that and say, hey, this looks pretty good, and you get your permit. And those are pretty quick, much quicker than a total hearing. Country inns. In the past, country inns were allowed, and they still are allowed, all over the county, but it required a special use permit in every case. We had to go to the hearing examiner, and no overnight stays were allowed. Now, country inn definition has been changed so that it includes overnight stays. You can also have a lounge associated with the restaurant, and different approvals. If you want one up to 4,500 square feet, just a site plan review by staff. If you want one that's much larger than that, up to 8,000 square feet, we do need to go to a special use permit for the hearing examiner. But even that, even though that's the same process as before, the limit before was 6,000 square feet, and now you can go to 8,000. And that's a pretty good sized country inn, which would permit corporate meetings and large lunches and and things like that could be accommodated of a company of that size. Group camping, reunions, corporate events, nature tourism, all the ecotourism stuff that Curtis talked about, that's allowed. If you want on your farm to do any of that kind of thing, it's just an administrative, one-time only site plan review. And again, once you get approved, you're approved for indefinitely. The genesis of the agritourism in the earliest stages, we were looking at wineries and breweries. How do we get those to flourish in Thurston County? And it just kept growing until it got to the overall agritourism overlay district. But embedded in that AOD is an allowance for wineries, breweries, distilleries, and cider mills that were never there before. In the past, you could do those things if you had an industrial commercial site and got a special use permit, or at least paid a lot for your industrial commercial location. Or you could do it as a home-based industry and be limited to 4,000 square feet. Now we have it so that you can go all the way to 20,000 square feet. In each of the cases, the wineries, breweries, distilleries. And we're hopeful that we will get some of those and some expansion of existing ones in the county. And I think those, as Curtis mentioned, those are attractors of tourists and folks who want to see what's going on, how it's made, and to purchase the product. In the past, in addition, you had to grow your grapes on site. Well, guess what? Thurston County doesn't want to. It doesn't work very well. So it was tough to have a winery in Thurston County in the past. Now, you don't have to grow them here. You don't have to grow them here at all. So you get them wherever you want to get them. You know, we hope you get them from state, get them from Yakima Valley or somewhere in state, but it's not necessary. The accessory commercial stuff that we talked about earlier, 75% being from the Pacific Northwest. If you want a larger, up to 6,000 square feet, which again is a pretty large store, and it has to be on a farm. So we're not allowing things that will compete directly with the hardware store or the convenience store down the street. But these are on a farm, and they're primarily farm products. But you can go to 6,000 square feet without ever going to a public hearing. It would be, again, a staff review. Scott would be one. And Scott's a pretty good guy, too. He's not gonna get you, make you do things you don't need to do. And the short-term events, up to 21 days, still is only a staff review. Then we go to the last category, which is the larger things. And these are mostly things that just were never allowed. Couldn't even do them in this county under any circumstance. Farm stands up to 3,000 square feet. With a hearing, you can get one approved and it can stay there. We're guessing in most cases these farm stands would be seasonal, but it's not a requirement. Country inns up to 8,000 square feet, yes.
That first category says in most of rural Thurston County. Is that outside of this new district? So
Yes.
any place in Thurston County?
Yes, the farm stands, and all three of the farm stands in each category, those are allowed all over the county. The other stuff that doesn't say all over the county are just allowed within the grid.
Okay, thank you.
So the country inns, large ones, 8,000 square feet with a special use permit. Wineries, breweries up to 20,000 square feet again. Those accessory commercial retail operations over 6,000 square feet, so there's no upper size limit. I mean, but there's a practical size limit because you would be required to sell farm type products, and 6,000 square foot store is pretty big. And then one that we've had numerous people inquire about already are these short-term events, over 21 days per year. So you could set up your barn, for instance, for wedding receptions, every summer and spring and fall weekend, or have a wine festival, if you want, with hundreds of people that might show up. Those require a special use permit, but in the past you couldn't even do those at all. And now it's at least it's a possibility, which is pretty exciting because we've got a lot of people who requested.
Is it a possibility outside the red zone or only in the red zone?
Right now, only in the red zone. Only in the red zone. Now, which leads me to the next question is, why is that the red zone? And how was that boundary set? Well, it started out historically, this started out as a way to help the Tenino Wine Festival, and it was going to be a little box around the town of Tenino. And then along came the mayor of the city of Rainier and said, whoa, wait a minute, what about us? We'd like to be included here too. So we thought, okay, well, let's do a little box, and it didn't really work well. We had a big old rectangle going from Tenino to Rainier. And others said, well, you know, we think we should be involved and be able to have these relaxation of permitting requirements. So we ultimately decided, and it wasn't just me or Scott or Commissioner Romero. There was an agritourism group that met dozens of times for 2 years, which involved all form of agritourism and economic development. Michael Cave was on there, and we invited folks from the Convention Bureau and various farm and cider operations. Well, ultimately, we determined that, this group determined, and it was also agreed to by the Planning Commission after 8 public meetings with the Planning Commission, plus a public hearing, but that'd be the line, that we'd take approximately the southern 1/3 of the county. And the stuff that you see in the green that's excluded, that's long-term forestry area, so it didn't really fit into the agritourism concept that we had. So the area inside the red, including the little bit up in the Nisqually Ag to the north, that represents about 40% of the non-forestry rural county. That line on the northern boundary, there was no science based on placing that line there. That line was put there as a starting point, and it didn't actually look like that the first time. And over time, it was adjusted south and north, depending on the testimony that we received and people who wanted to be in or didn't want to be in. And ultimately, after the public hearings were done, that's the line. We did get a lot of folks who wanted to know why we didn't go to the full county. Let's just do this full county. Well, there's several reasons. One of which, we don't know how this is going to work very well. So we wanted to try it in the area that we felt was the most in need of an economic boost, that being South Thurston County, and that's the area of the county that has the most agriculture as well. So that was a logical area to start. And secondarily, we explored the possibility of going county-wide with our prosecutor's office. We ran into trouble with the Growth Management Act. It was a potential that this would be seen as a commercialization of the entire rural county, and the Growth Hearings Board would potentially object, and then we'd be in a long fight over that. So we decided to limit it for the time being to 7/3. That doesn't mean it's going to stay there after 18 to 24 months. If it looks like it's something that would be good countywide, or at least expanded a little bit, that's a possibility. We would also check that out with the Growth Hearings Board. We don't want to get in trouble with them. Yes?
Is there an appeals process? Because Gate Road is of the boundary line. And we live on Gate Road. And so where the line is right now, it's just across the street from us. So is there a way to appeal, or do we have to wait 18 to 24 months?
Yeah, the appeal periods are all expired, so there really is no way to appeal. But what you would want to do at this point is write a letter to Scott. We'll keep that on file, and you're right, it is that 18 to 24 month period. We're pretty locked in right now for that period of time. It's not impossible to change at any time. It takes board action. So the board could make changes prior to the 18 to 24 months, but I'm not sure. Maybe I'd let Commissioner Romero speak on that part, but we've told the public at this point that we're going to try this for 18 months at least.
But meanwhile, the county is still very much willing to work with landowners and to maybe help with coming up with a plan or some ideas or starting to get the ball rolling so that in the future this could be helpful, beneficial. Is that?
We're talking though just across the street. It's the width of a 2-lane road. So.
I don't know if we can work with you though, Scott. No, yes, we can, for sure. We'll work with you and see what we can do for you. Now, because there has to be a line somewhere.
I understand, but there's no one else around.
We couldn't jump the road and let you do things that the AOD now allows, but we can. But there are other things we can do. We'll work with you, and then for sure we'll have you noted as a person who wants to be in at the next board review of this ordinance. What sort of thing did you have in mind? Do you know?
Oh, yes, I don't want to go.
Okay, well, we will definitely, we can sit and talk. If you want
That'd be
to
great,
leave your
thank you.
name and number with Scott, and we'll.
We've already talked to
Okay,
Scott.
all right, good.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll help you out in any way we can.
Another question here, Mike.
Okay.
We live in the northern part of the county, but it's agricultural, residential. And the question would be, even after this 18, 24 months, will it be possible for individual parcels to be designated in this zone if it meets other criteria or particular usage or things along those lines? Because every line you draw is arbitrary. I mean, that's just the way life is. But there may be other uses, and because it's north of Olympia or whatever, it's agricultural in nature. What difference does it make?
Well, I mean, that's an argument we heard a lot, and we considered it. But you're right, we had to draw that line somewhere, so that's what we chose. Now in the future, I believe we will get to the whole county eventually. I don't know how long it'll take. Talk about individual lots. The state law wouldn't allow us to do that, but we could do, depending on what we hear at the public hearings and the board's discretion, certain areas could be put in. I mean, we did that with the Nisqually Valley there. So that's not out of the question. It wouldn't be able to be a parcel, but it could be an area that we would look at that 18-month period of time.
On the cottage food operations, is this going to clash with the new state law?
No, in fact, it says in the
Can you
ordinance.
repeat the question?
Oh, yes, the cottage food industry, would that conflict with the new state law? It would not, because the state law trumps ours, and our code specifically says that it's allowed so long as it also meets the applicable RCW.
Mike, could you say what the new state law is for people?
Well, it's a cottage industry. It defines what a cottage industry is, and it actually allows jams, jellies, butters, fruit butters, and it says other non-hazardous foods. Yeah, big products, and non-hazardous foods, which which I'm not real sure what that means. But I thought all foods were supposed to be non-hazardous.
Can goes in special ways to prevent botulism.
Oh, yeah.
That's a hazardous.
Okay. So at any rate, whatever the state law says, we have to comply with that. But what our code did was allow that cottage food industry to occur without permitting. So it's an allowed use by right, which it wasn't before.
In the staff review, there, number 3, agricultural homestays with up to 8 guest units. How do you define a guest unit? You know, like I have a house with 5 bedrooms. Is that 1 guest unit, or is that 5 guest units? Or?
Well, you would tell us
Oh, okay.
how many bedrooms you have and how many you're going to use for guest units, and we would approve. Now, that does require staff approval, but
Right. I'm just trying to get an idea of what a guest unit is. Is it 8 separate houses?
could be. If you have a lot of options, you can have bedrooms, you can build them out on the site. Now, of course, you have to meet the underlying density. And most of the rural counties zone 1 to 5, so then you subtract the house that's already there, and then whatever you have left over, you can have that many additional units up to 8. And, it says in here they're maximum 600 square feet and can have a kitchen. So you could actually build them or make it part of your existing house. I saw another hand over here somewhere.
I was going to say, wouldn't that be just about the same as a bed and breakfast? I mean, it would fall under the same kind of guidelines that you have for bed and breakfast? If you're going to have these separate cottages or?
Yeah.
In that regard, they count bedrooms. They don't count the structure, they count the bedrooms.
And it is similar to a bed and breakfast. And you could actually do a bed and breakfast too. It's a different review process. The guest houses, there's just more options there. You can actually build a new house, or you can put it in your garage or your barn, renovate that, or bedrooms in the existing house. And it's very similar to a bed and breakfast. You're correct. But if we call it a farm homestay, it gets a different review process, an easier review process. Anyone else? Okay. And Scott, is there anything you want to mention before we head off to lunch?
Just feel free to give me a call or email, and chat about what you want to do.
So you can find Scott on the county's website, which is URL.
County website, Thurston.wad. I never go there because I'm already there. Yes, Thurston.wa.us. Yeah. Or you can Google that, just Thurston County, and it'll get you right there. Oh, Benyon, yeah. That'd be even good. Just know that we're pretty nice people. We're here to work for you and with you. This ordinance helps us a lot in doing that. And even if you don't fit exactly into one of these categories, we'll see if we can get you to adjust your project just enough so that it does fit. I mean, we're here to make sure that agriculture stays in Thurston County. So, with that,
Are you able to stay during lunch too, Mike?
Yeah, I'll stay during lunch for a little while.
Are you able to stay during lunch? So, Mike and Scott will be here during lunch. What we'd like to have you do is take your chair with you. We've set some tables up in the back. Just take your chair to the table. And then in the side room there is where our lunch is. It's a buffet lunch. So let's have lunch and visit with each other.